Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Michael, and as always, we're going to be getting into some more stories. If you enjoy, make sure to leave a like, and if you're new, I'd appreciate if you subscribed. Without further ado, let's begin. This story was posted by a user named Nowhere12 in the marriage subreddit. The post is titled, "My husband is appearing in gym girl TikToks." Alright, I hope I'm not about to come across as crazy. The situation is this. I am a 27-year-old female and my husband, who is 28, and I go to a local gym a few times a week. He mainly lifts weights and is definitely one of the stronger guys there. There are several fitfluencers, both male and female, who frequent our gym, and over the past few months, the girls have started to be really friendly with him. I don't really mind that. It's fine to ask for a spot or a form check, but what I didn't realize, and he didn't either at first, is that he was ending up in their Instagram and TikTok videos. I found out because a friend who follows one of these girls sent me a reel asking if I knew my husband was in these videos. When I asked him if he knew, he said he assumed he was, but didn't realize they had so many followers. The thing that really weirded me out is how the comment section had a lot of comments about how this girl needs to get with her gym crush. She had even pinned some and had not mentioned anywhere that he is married. I'm not upset with him, but I just feel like her behavior is really odd. I don't want to be controlling, but I also don't feel comfortable with her being around him, especially if I'm not present. I guess I'm just asking for advice on how to bring this up with my husband without coming across as controlling. Okay people, I appreciate you all so much for commenting on my post yesterday and validating that I'm not being crazy. Last night I brought up the situation with the influencers again and told my husband that comments were being left on the videos that made me uncomfortable, and I showed him. Upon seeing the pinned comments and me explaining who pins a comment and how, I think his words were, "Damn, that's sketchy." I sort of balked at telling him to do anything, but he told me he would tell the girls that they can't film him anymore and to get rid of the pinned comments. We went to the gym this evening and I saw him go talk to her, and now, a couple of hours later, those comments are gone. He said the girl was super embarrassed and apologized a lot. I'm so glad I talked to him because now I feel loads better. This story is refreshingly simple, and I'm glad that it ended that way. It's understandable that people get carried away on the internet and sometimes forget that these are real people they're involving. But what's important here is the creator immediately did as OP's husband requested. In my opinion, I think that whoever the creator was actually got off extremely lightly. I'm not saying that she should have faced any consequences necessarily, but obviously there are a lot of people who would blow up if they found out they were being recorded without their knowledge. In fact, I really dislike this wave in the last 6 years where recording in the gym has become so common. This next story was made in the relationship advice subreddit by a user named ElephantNo31. The post is titled, "My younger brother's GF said something that made me and everyone else super uncomfortable. It's been months and it's still a problem. How do I get everyone to move past this?" So, some background, my brother, will call him John, and I are very different people and always have been. I'm a nerdy guy who likes playing Dungeons and Dragons and works from home coding websites. He's always been sporty and has one of those corporate office jobs where I swear half of his work is just playing golf and going to fancy lunches. We didn't always get along, but we're pretty good these days. He started dating his girlfriend, who we'll call Jane, a few years back during what was a pretty low point for me in life. I had just gotten out of a long-term relationship that had ended anything but amicably, was burning out of the career I went to college for, and in general was about 2 paychecks away from having to move in with my folks. The stress of it all was taking a toll on my body. I went from the lightly chubby I'd been my whole life to just straight up fat. And shortly after the breakup, I had an anxiety attack so bad it put me in the hospital. It was not a good time to get to know me. I was basically the picture of a mess up older brother, but I turned it around. I got the mental health assistance I needed to diagnose and treat some long-standing issues. With that as a springboard, I started exercising more and eating better, finding cooking to be a good hobby that also led to me eating less takeout and fewer processed foods. I'm still no Adonis and still have a bit of a tummy, but I'm much stronger and feel better. I was able to quit my job and find a new one in a field I had never considered, but found I loved enough that I'm going back to school in the fall to work on a PhD so I can pursue it further. And finally, I started dating again someone, we'll call her Flo, who was a better match for me than my ex. Which all brings us to the night things went wrong. We had a family gathering at my parents' house with extended family and everyone, plus Jane and Flo. I was making dinner, a beef Wellington. Everyone was raving about my food. I also cooked dinner this past Thanksgiving and about my recent glow up, my new job, the program I got into, etc. I was smiling politely and mostly just trying to get through a bunch of dinner prep while they wouldn't get out of my way. Then Jane said, "Yeah, never thought I'd picked the wrong brother, but I'm starting to think I might have." You could hear a pin drop. I said nothing, again, just awkwardly laughed at what I assumed to have been a bad joke. Jane's face immediately changed to the look of someone who had only just realized her mess up. John looked pissed, and the two of them left the kitchen shortly after. From what I could see, she seemed to be trying to apologize to him while he looked really hurt. My relatives said nothing, not immediately anyway. Flo kind of just winced and later told me that it was really awkward having to stand there, but she didn't know what else to do that wouldn't have escalated things or put me on the spot. That was over 2 months ago, and both John and Jane have been avoiding me like the plague, not even a text since then. Whenever I meet up with my relatives, they badmouth her over it, and while I think Jane did mess up by saying that, I really do think she was just making a bad joke. Personally, I think they're overreacting. Aside from this, I think she's probably the first person he's ever dated who is a good fit for him in terms of personality and lifestyle. The only person being normal about it is Flo, who thinks it was weird, but like me, just a dumb thing to say. No jealousy, she knows Jane isn't my type. How do I clear the air with Jane and John and get people to stop bringing this up? I'm sick of hearing about it and just want things to go back to how they were before. Right now, it just feels like a dark cloud over all of our interactions. Update. I messaged John, "We're grabbing a beer over the weekend. I will update later." In the meantime, here is some clarifying information in response to some of the other comments. Jane is a very nice person, and she really cares for John. She's been with him through some difficult times, including a period when work separated them for 3 months, and they're otherwise attached at the hip. She does have what some might call a lack of a filter. We've known that for a while, but she would absolutely never leave him for me. As for why my relatives won't let it go, it's probably because they're a bunch of old Italian Catholics who like to gossip, which, incidentally, is probably why they didn't like the joke in the first place. My brother and I have a pretty good relationship as adults and aren't especially competitive. My parents and relatives don't favor one of us over the other, though admittedly, they do understand my brother's career path better than mine. I agree with a number of comments that the impetus for the joke was that I'm a particularly good cook, especially when it comes to celebratory feasts. John is okay in the kitchen, but he's the kind of guy for whom a fancy meal just means picking up a more expensive cut of steak. I really don't think it has anything to do with me being the hot brother now, as a few comments suggested. John and I have always looked very different. Comparing us would be more a matter of personal preference than any kind of objective hotness scale. He's tall with a runner's build, and I'm a few inches shorter with a wider build and more visible muscles, as weightlifting is my main form of exercise. Lastly, not to toot my own horn, but I've never had any issues getting dates, barring the aforementioned year-long period when my life was falling apart, so I must have been doing something right. Lastly, as some have said, I probably could have saved everyone some awkwardness by playing along with Jane's comment with a "sorry, Flo got to me first," or something similar. I go into what Flo dramatically calls the kitchen death drive, while cooking complicated meals, where I'm laser focused on the task at hand to the exclusion of all else, and my responses to questions tend to be short, curt, and even a bit rude. Normally, I would have tried to help salvage the bad joke, but I was searing a big, expensive piece of tenderloin at the moment, so my thoughts were elsewhere. Final update. I met up with John at a sports bar we go to sometimes when our dad is in town. We shot the shit for a little bit before I asked him if everything was cool. He didn't really know what I was talking about at first. I had to remind him that weird thing at the family dinner, and he immediately knew what I meant. I asked if we were all right, if they were all right, and lastly, what we should do about our nosy Catholic relatives gossiping about all this shit. First off, he confirmed what I and most of y'all thought was true. Jane was talking about my cooking exclusively. She's a big fan. It's actually the reason she came to that gathering in the first place. So that's good to hear. It had nothing to do with my physique, though John did congratulate me on the additional weight I'd lost since the whole ordeal. Second, John's issue with Jane's joke had nothing to do with the idea of her leaving him for me or that he'd lost some prestige as the athlete in our family or anything like that. Something I didn't mention in the original post because I didn't think it was important is that John and I grew up middle class, while Jane's family is loaded. Not billionaires, but she graduated from an Ivy League college with no student loans, which she's turned into a well-paying and highly specialized tech job. She and John go on lots of vacations together, have a very nice apartment in a very expensive part of the city, and all that stuff. The thing is, while John does pretty well for himself at work, he's not making nearly as much as she is and doesn't have old family money to fall back on. Trying to keep up with her has been putting a significant dent in his savings. Apparently, he's been psyching himself up to talk to her about how they may need to make some lifestyle adjustments so he can put more money away in savings, and was worried about how that might go. Hearing her say that I might be a better option after hearing about my new, to his mind, high-earning PhD program was the sort of thing that came at exactly the wrong time, so he had to walk away. I did have a little laugh at that. This PhD will open a lot of doors for me, but it's definitely not going to make me a millionaire. Adding to the sting of that, while he and I don't have much of a rivalry, he does still have some insecurity about me being the smart one of the two of us. I say this with all the love in my heart. John is an extremely intelligent guy, but you'd never know that from just talking to him. He's a whiz with numbers and knows more about corporate finance than nearly anyone I've ever met at any age. He also speaks with the vocabulary and goofy demeanor of a frat boy. So on top of the anxiety about his rich girlfriend thinking he's too broke to hang out, he was a little frustrated about the idea of a doctorate putting more perceived distance between us. He apologized for that jealousy. I told him it was fine and that if folks were giving him trouble, he could tell them he wasn't going to look over their stock portfolios anymore. He also said that he and Jane had spoken about the money and that she took it very well. The reason he hadn't been in touch lately was because they'd been looking for a more affordable apartment to move into when their lease is up. The only thing left was how to handle the extended family. Apparently, John didn't know they were still going on about that, largely because whenever he and Jane see them, they just talk about how Flo has too many piercings and swears too much. That gossip was news to me, so we mutually said, forget 'em, and decided to continue not letting what they say about our partners get to us. Instead, we agreed to spend more time, just the four of us, and before we left for the night, John did ask me for a few of my recipes. I personally think that the comment from the girlfriend was super weird, even if there was no real romantic intent behind it. There were much better ways to deliver her thoughts than how she ended up doing it. At first, I thought that this story was going to end horribly, but thankfully, yet again, this had a pretty amicable ending. There were no hard feelings of betrayal, and it was just a bad joke. It's important to keep your family close and maintain those relationships, and I'm glad these two brothers seem to work it all out.